Welcome to the Rich, Young, and Powerful podcast. This is the place where we help average givers become everyday philanthropists. I'm your host, Andrew McNair, a financial commentator, author, nine-figure wealth manager, and philanthropist too. I'm going to show you how to give more, how to find more fulfillment, and help you impact the causes that you care about the most. Because when a giver gives more, they receive and become more. Today, I feel really honored to share with you our special guest. Remi Adeleke is the former Navy SEAL, filmmaker, writer, and author who you've probably heard his story. There's a book about his story. And so we're really honored to bring you on, Remi. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on, brother. I appreciate you.
Well, I'm really excited because I know there are some listeners that have not heard this Black Panther coming to America story. Yeah. And so I don't want you to leave out much detail, but can you share with us your amazing life story?
Yeah, so feel free to cut me off if I'm going too long-winded.
That's okay.
But I was born in Nigeria. My dad was Chief John Adebayo Adeleke. He was, in Western culture, we refer to royalty as king, queen, prince, princess, Dutch. In African culture, especially West African culture, royalty is referred to as chief and your last name. So my last name, Adeleke, Ade means crown and Leke means is supreme or is above. And so my dad, he not only had the title, but he amassed a lot of wealth in the West in his early years, having gone to the University of London and studied architecture and engineering, and then, developed a bunch of different businesses. He was on the board of the World Trade Center. He was on the board of the British Financial Planning Council. And then after a number of years, he came back to Nigeria and decided to bring all of his talents and education to Nigeria in order to develop a financial sector where people from all around Africa and the world could come and do business. And that was kind of when I came along. I was born in 1982. And so I was born into the wealth and the prestige. We had absolutely everything, from cars to nannies to the drivers to cooks. We lived on a compound. My dad would host lavish parties with expats and dignitaries from not just from around Nigeria, but from around the world.
And your dad was used to this lifestyle too, because and he was a savant too. Not only was he wealthy and royal, but he was also super educated and smart.
Yeah, he was very, very smart. I mean, my grandfather died when he was 8, and he migrated down with my grandmother because my grandfather had like eight wives. And so he migrated down to Nigeria, to Lagos with my grandmother. And there were Christian missionaries there. And they, along with teaching the Bible, they also taught math and science and literature and all the Western topics that we learn in our education system. And he was able to memorize everything. I mean, he was just brilliant. He memorized the Bible, memorized all kinds of mathematical equations and grammatical formatting and all of that. And that's why he ended up getting a full ride scholarship to the University of London. And so, yeah, wow. He was a brilliant guy. He was he was always not one, but like 100 steps ahead of everyone else, just because he was such a great visionary. And he ended up taking that vision and engineering one of the first man-made islands in the world. It was known as Lagoon City, and that was where he wanted to be able to essentially do commerce. He wanted people to be able to come to Lagoon City, and it was going to be like the World Trade Center of Nigeria. Wow. As a matter of fact, the same architect of the World Trade Center, a Japanese man by the name of Minoru Yamasaki, he architected or designed the Twin Towers that was supposed to stand at the center of Lagoon City, which is now known as Banana Island. So and
so these businesses took your dad around the world and ultimately to New York City, right?
Yeah. So he that's where he met my mom. Actually, he was actually in New York because he was on the board of the World Trade Center. But yeah, his business did take him all around the world, and he met my mom in New York City. My mom's a born and raised New Yorker, and then they got married 5 months after they met. And
But their story of meeting is just fantastic. You can't leave out this part.
oh yeah. So they went to my mom. She always loved African art. She consumed. She loved art in general. You know, she was a big consumer of plays and books and poems, and so she was really big in all that. And she saw that there was going to be a exhibit on Yoruba art, which there's a few major tribes in Nigeria, and one of them, my dad's tribe, is Yoruba, and I'm Yoruba as well, and so my dad happened to be in New York City because he was doing business at the World Trade Center, and then he saw that there was an exhibit on Yoruba art. So he decided, let me go to the Metropolitan Museum to check this out. So they both end up going at the same time. And my mom is at like a painting or sculpture, I can't recall which one. And she's staring at it. And then my dad, he's staring at it. And he greets her, and and then she ends up walking off, and she goes to another piece of art, and he happens to be there, and he's trying to charm her, and then then she goes to another piece of art, and he shows up, and tries to charm her some more, and my mom wasn't really having it because she was a New Yorker, right? So but eventually,
and here's this guy that says, I'm a chief from the Yoruba tribe, and can speak all of these different languages.
Yeah. Not just different languages, but different accents, different dialects. Like he spoke like 4 different tribal languages, but he also had the ability to fluctuate between Nigerian pidgin and then a British accent. And then, because he, spent a lot of time in the UK, so he had, he knew what accent to put on to try to charm the ladies. And so, my mom finally agreed to a date, and they got married 5 months later. And then my mom moved to Nigeria with my dad. And
what a culture shock, right?
Yeah. Well, my mom, she was a flight attendant.
Okay.
I want to say, maybe she was still a flight attendant when she met my dad, but I know that she was a flight attendant for a number of years, so she had traveled all over the world. Wow. So it wasn't that much of a culture shock to her because she had been everywhere. I think she flew for Pan Am. She was a flight attendant for Pan Am. So yeah, it wasn't much of a culture shock for her. And yeah, so that's, me and my brother was born in 81. He was a year older than me. And then I was born in 82. And then unfortunately, there's a lot more to the story, but the Nigerian government essentially stripped my dad of his island. And all of his wealth had been wrapped up into it because he had invested millions of dollars, not just into dredging the foreshore to turn it into an island, but signing contracts with construction workers and different companies that were going to be housed on the island and so on and so forth. And so he essentially
these are millions of pounds, like in the late 70s, early 80s, right?
Yeah. It's millions of pounds. And pounds is, I think like 1 pound is like $1.50 or something like that, US. So we're talking, I think it was like 7-8 pounds at the time that my dad invested to buy the land.
So it's so respectable because he's taking all of his knowledge and investing it back into his home country. Yep. He's doubling down on his own country.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, because he believed that Nigeria, a lot of people don't realize this, but Nigeria is just so rich in resources. From gold to cocoa to natural gas to oil in abundance. And so my dad was of the mindset that if we can get organized, there's no reason why we shouldn't be like an America or a Saudi Arabia, like a rich country where the majority of the people are thriving, opposed to this huge wealth gap where you have the majority of people in utter poverty. And then you have a few people that are controlling it in a corrupt way and maintaining their riches. And so, man, it's that was why my dad did what he did, because he wanted to be able to you know, essentially organize Nigeria better, because if they could be organized, then it will benefit the people. So what he did, wasn't for himself. Yeah, he was going to make money out of it, but at the end of the day, it was for the benefit of the people. And unfortunately, the government, being as corrupt as it is and was, they cared more about how can they use this island for themselves, and opposed to the people, and they took it from them. And it shows, because
we take that for granted here in the United States, how important property rights are. I mean, for that very reason. We have corruption in the United States, but those are unparalleled types of corruption where you can invest millions of pounds and then lose your rights to something. Exactly. And your dad, which we won't go into it, lost property twice there, which is insane.
Yeah, miracle. Yeah. And you spot on as far as here in the US, if you start a business, it's your business. You start buy a house, like the house I'm in, it's your house. Like, the government can't, a senator or a congressman can't be driving by and then say, oh, I like that house, I'm going to,
exactly,
fudge some paperwork and make it my house, and so, man, you're spot on. And so my dad went to court and, died 3 weeks later. We went from having absolutely everything to having nothing, because all of his finances were wrapped up in it. He was an all-in kind of guy. And I'm the same way, where, it's like, hey, when I believed in something, when he believed in something and believed that it was going to work, he was all in. And if what didn't happen to him happened, if what didn't happen to him didn't happen, he'd be billionaires. You know what I mean? He'd have been a billionaire.
And your life would have been completely different. And we're going to talk about how, without that, life of Easy Street, you maybe have not had the experiences and the beautiful stories you have today, which is just, people also need to remember that, you have many reasons why, where you could say, hey, I grew up with no father in my life. And we're going to see how that didn't stop you one bit. A couple speed bumps is about to happen, but that it didn't slow you down to your ultimate purpose.
No, 100%. I'm grateful. I say it all the time, and people kind of give me weird looks, but I'm grateful for the way things turned out, because I definitely want to have had the path that I've had, and I want to be the man I am. I want to be where I'm at today. And I don't think I would appreciate success, and I would appreciate the journey if I was just handed absolutely everything.
Yeah, if you'd have stayed in the compound gates, there's for sure you wouldn't appreciate it. But your mom, she tried to talk your dad to diversify and to put some money back in the States, because she's from New York. She's had the fast one pulled on her before. If you live in New York City, you've had someone try to pull the fast one on you. But y'all are unfortunately going to have to go back to the States.
Yeah. So we end up back in the States, and I was, it was the late 80s, it was the late 80s. It was, crack epidemic, man. There was so much going on. There was a lot of crime in the Bronx. The mafia was still widespread in what they did, and well organized, and pretty much running a lot of New York City. So it was definitely went from the nice cool waters of Fiji to the hot bath of the Bronx.
So you go back to the States, and what a wake up call that is, because you're in the middle of the Bronx.
Yeah. It wasn't much, it wasn't much of a wake-up call, because my mom did a really good job of masking the reality of what had happened. She did. She would keep our apartment well kept, and she would expose us to the arts. She would save her pennies, and when she had the money, she would take us to a play. She would take us to art galleries. As a matter of fact, she would take jobs at art galleries and museums, so that way we can go for free. And so I remember being a little kid going to the Schomburg and going to the Metropolitan Museum of Natural History, and just going to all of these different museums. And I remember watching Showboat, which was which was a good play, and Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk. Again, my mom was just really big on augmenting the public education system, but at the same time, pulling us outside of the environment that we were in, and putting us in the environment that she felt we believed to be in. I mean, she would save her money and take us to like nice restaurants, and we would have to like get dressed up in like collared shirts and pants, and so that we could learn which fork to eat with and how to act, and to pull a chair out for a woman, and to, you know, wait to be seated, and to say thank you to the waiters. You know, she was really big on, you know, educating my brother and I, and also exposing us to things that were outside of the area that we lived in, so that way we knew how to act when we would eventually get there. And so it wasn't.
She must have been, you know, is she still living?
Yeah, my mom's still alive. She's 71. She just turned 71 August 24th. She looks like she's like 50 because she's a fitness fanatic. She's on social media. She has a bunch of followers on social media and her own YouTube channel, and she trains.
Wow.
She's a personal trainer, and yeah, man,
you got to be so proud of your mom. I mean, as you know, as a parent, you know, single parents deserve so much credit. And I remember you telling this story about how when she told you and your brother about your dad passing, like she had done such a good job of like not breaking down and just being such a fortress really as a mother. So it's pretty cool.
No, absolutely. Yeah, she's mental toughness. I mean, before anybody even heard that term, mental toughness, she was applying it, you know, every day of her life. And that's why, you know, I feel like I've been able to achieve and get through the things that I've been able to get through in life, because I was able to have like a constant example of what it meant to persevere and what it meant to face adversity and failure, but pick yourself up again and again and again and again and again. And, you know, my mom did that. So when you see that day in and day out, no complaining, it just becomes like normal to you. So like, you know, when I end up in SEAL training and it sucks, or like, you know, I fail to swim, you know, or I'm suffering, it's just like, oh, my mom went through all of this, you know, in a different way. And so it's like, this is normal, you know? So, yeah, my mom definitely set me and my brother up for success. She really created that, gave us that template of what it meant to overcome. And that's something that I try to pass on to my kids. You know, my kids' situation is a lot different now because my wife's a doctor, you know, so she's successful. Sure. And, you know, I do what I do, and I have one, you know, so they have like a bit of an easier life, I would say. But at the same time,
sometimes that's so much harder, right? Because when they're born on Easy Street, it's hard to say, hey, not everyone's enjoying all the pleasures you are enjoying right now and the frills.
Exactly. But, you know, me and my wife, I think we do a pretty good job of, you know, fostering adversity, you know, you know, and causing them to learn through their mistakes, not giving them handouts, making them earn things. So, hey, you want to watch a movie on Friday night? You know, you got to earn that. You want to, you know, watch cartoons in the morning? You got to earn that. You want a treat after dinner? You got to earn that. You know, so just showing them that, you know, everything is earned. It's not given. And, you know, one thing I try to talk to them about all the time, especially my youngest son, because he comes into my office, you know, during the day. He's like, why are you working? Like, you know, why don't you stop working? It's like, and it's like early. It's like, you know, 12 o'clock. And it's like, son, like, I got to work, you know, like all of this stuff that we have is not for free. You know, in order for dad to be able to pay for this stuff, like he has to work. Like there's a to give and take in life, you know? So me and my wife, we try to pass those lessons on to them so that they don't, you know, fall into this.
Have to learn them the hard way.
Exactly.
Which is where I want to pick up the story, because I also heard you say that you were looking for just the simple words like, you're good, you've done well, son. but that could have not happened, that affirmation. And so can you share with us how, even though your mom's mental toughness, but that search for a man's voice to affirm you took you down some wrong paths?
Yeah, I want to say that at the time I was conscious of it, though, where I was aware that I needed a father. I was looking for a father to affirm me or give me that pat on the back. That came out of, reflecting and
Sure.
and really examine my life, and then, having experience with kids who are, being, I was a youth pastor for a little bit in the inner city, and most of the kids grew up in single parent homes, and then seeing myself in them and seeing them, wanting that affirmation, and then having kids and seeing how my kids respond to me affirming them as a father, and how that means a lot to them. So it was a lot of that was in retrospect, but you're right, unconsciously, I was crying out for a father, especially as I got into my early teens, and and really wanted to rise out of my station. A lot of the decisions that I made as far as selling drugs and stealing to make money and all this stuff was because, unconsciously I was crying out to be affirmed by people, to get that pat on my back, to say, get people to say, hey, well done, or you're the man, or you're doing great, but and looking back, that was the kind of stuff that drove me. Like when I did get that affirmation, but I was getting affirmation for doing the wrong things, sleeping with with different girls. Oh yeah, you hooked up with that girl, but trying to go, yeah, you the man, or you a player, and stuff. And that kind of stuff, boosted my ego.
And also in money. I know you mentioned that, and that's where that entrepreneurial spirit, probably again from your dad gets passed down to you, but you start building some unscrupulous businesses, we'll call it that.
Yeah. I did all kinds of things. I worked at a sneaker store, and I would, essentially tell people who came in, if they didn't look suspicious or they didn't look like people who were telling me, I would say to them, hey, if the sneakers cost $100, hey, give me $70 cash, and give me your shoes on your feet, and you can walk out of here with the shoes, the brand new shoes. And they give me $70 cash, and I would take their old shoes, put them in the box, and I would put that box in the defective section. And nobody ever checked the defective section. So I was, I was making a lot of money. I was the kid in school, in high school, that everybody would come to essentially get the new sneakers at a cheaper price, and then,
that's a hot demand right there.
Yeah. And then that turned into selling drugs, and to do every job. There's still other little jobs that I had, but every job I had, like, I found a way to make more money. Again, it was that entrepreneur spirit. It's that, this is the boundary that I'm in, but like there's a way to work outside the boundary, like just outside the boundary, and make a bit more money. And so yeah, man, I was started selling drugs, and then I got into the cell phone hustling business, and I was making even more money selling illegal.
This one was interesting. I mean, you looked outside the box creatively to how to make more money in this. If you'll share it with people, this business that you had.
Yeah, so I got a job at a company, we'll just call it a company, WTC. WCT, excuse me. And
yes.
And so I would essentially this is before there was a lot of regulations around cell phones and credit. Cell phones were brand new. People really didn't know how to get one and all of this stuff. And so I would get people's social, date of birth, full name, and if they credit and run their credit. I had a license, so I had the ability to run their credit. If they had good credit, I could activate up to 3 cell phones on one person's line of credit. And so I had a buddy of mine whose girlfriend was a hospice nurse. So she would get him 100, 200 people. I mean, every couple of months, like, list of people who were either dead or dying, and I would activate cell phones, up to 3 phones on one person's line of credit, and I would sell those cell phones for anywhere between, depending on the phone, $300 to $900.
That's crazy.
My primary customer were drug dealers, because they liked the phones, because the phones would stay on for 90 days.
Yeah, that's a good burner phone, right, to use.
Yeah, you can use it for 30 days. After 30 days, a bill would come in. You had an additional 30 days to pay that bill. So now that's 60 days. And if that bill wasn't paid in the next 30 days, which was a 90-day mark, then the phone would cut off. So, I was able to sell these phones, and drug dealers loved them because they had unlimited plans, because there was no such thing as unlimited plans. I mean, again, all of this stuff was being worked out in that time. This is 2001, so all of that stuff hadn't really been worked out yet, as far as, the legalities behind it, and finding people who weren't paying their bills, and yada, yada, yada. And there were no unlimited plans. The plan for my company, the best plan was, I think it was like $29.99 a month for 30 minutes. After you exceed past that 30 minute mark, then it was like 5 cents a minute. And that was where the cell phone companies, all of them, made their money. Mm-hmm. Because everybody would go over their plan, and people would get these outrageous bills. And at the same time, like I said, it wasn't really regulated, and so on top of that, I was making commission from my company. So I would get these commission checks, wild. On top, because I was the top seller.
Of course you were.
Because I was selling all of these phones. And if something happened and somebody was like, hey, typically when somebody's credit gets used, or, they get alerted, but the people whose credit was being used, and they were getting, the bills were going to the morgue.
Right.
I'm speaking, proverbially, but these people were already dead by the time 90 days. I mean, you're in hospice, you got, not too long to live. So by the time they got their bill, they were long gone. And the creditors can't chase them, a person that's not alive anymore. So that was my most lucrative business.
You're making thousands of dollars a week.
Oh yeah. It was crazy money. I bought a brand new car, man. I had my record company. That's me right there.
The Eighth Wonder.
Yeah, Eighth Wonder. I had my record company. So I still keep this on here as a reminder of my desk. And so I was able to fund my record company, and pay my artists, travel them down to pay for studio time, and do all of these things because of the amount of money that I was making. I was making crazy money,
And that wasn't your end goal. Like you had this record company that you were going to make it into a legitimate business. And yeah, that was my goal. My goal was to, do what, Jay-Z had done, and Damon Dash, where they were selling drugs, using the drug money to fund their record business, their record company business, Rockefeller. And then once Rockefeller got off the ground, and they left the drugs alone, and they went full time into music, and they were able to get out the game unscathed. And that was my plan. Now, you already started to probably understand that you might not come out this unscathed. And so can you share with us, lead us up to this Damascus moment that's going to happen? Because
Yeah, no, for sure. There were people who were doing what I was doing, and they were getting wrapped up and, prosecuted federally. And so I knew that, hey, there's a chance that I might not make it out this thing. But what ultimately happened, and this was a blessing because I don't think I would have stopped, but what ultimately happened was a drug dealer who I sold some phones to, those phones were supposed to last 90 days. They only lasted like 2 weeks, something short, month. I can't remember the exact time. This is almost 20 years ago, but they lasted a lot shorter than they were supposed to. And my life was threatened And because I sold him phones in bulk. He was the first person that I had ever sold phones in bulk. And it was something that I didn't want to do, but he talked me into it because he was then in return doubling the price and selling it. And so he had then sold those phones and they cut off early. So he wasn't happy. And that was essentially, that was a bad situation. But the good thing is, as I said, that was my wake up call. I gave him his money back and I decided I'm going to stop because at this point, the company I'm working for might be on to me. The fact that they cut off the phones might not be might be a sign that they're on to me. And then, yeah, man. So that was a huge wake up call for me. And that's when I gave up doing what I was doing and decided, I don't know what I'm gonna do for the next. I'm gonna try and make this music business thing work, but for the most part, I'm gonna stop the illegal stuff.
And that finally hit a closure, correct? Where you couldn't keep on pushing the record label forward.
Yeah, because I ran out of money. And it was really expensive to pay for these artists, pay for studio time, and kind of like what my dad did with the island, where he put all his money into the island. I put everything all of my remaining money into music because I believed in it. And I believed that if I can get a label deal, then all my problems will be solved. And so, but yeah, man, that was when it all came crashing down. No label deal came, the money ran out, and everything was gone, brother. Everything was gone. But again, it was all a blessing. You look back at things that happened, it was all God's direction, directing me the way I needed to be.
I love, Remi, how there's people in your life, so many people in your life that really God has put in your life to push you forward. I mean, by God's grace, there's people around all of us all the time. And I think this is on display in your life. If you'll share how just a recruiter that takes an interest in you can change your life.
Yeah. I when I made the decision to go into the Navy, I in retrospect, I truly believe it was God's voice that guided me to the recruiter that morning. I went to the Marine Corps recruiter's office first. There was nobody there. Sat there for about 15 minutes. No one showed up. Walked about 2 doors down to the Navy recruiter's office. There's a beautiful Navy recruiter there by the name of Tiana Nadine Reyes. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm gonna get me a new girlfriend from my stable. And she saw through all my foolishness and played the game, And long story short, she ran my background and found out that I had 2 warrants out for my arrest. I had a warrant in New York and I had a warrant in New Jersey. And I was petrified. I got up, ran toward the exit. She screamed at me to stop. And she asked me if I had, a suit. And I said no. She asked me if I had a collar shirt and some nice pants. I said, I'm sure I could find something. And she said, well, come back tomorrow. I said, for what? And she snapped at me and said, just come back tomorrow. I came back the next day, as she said, and she was in her dress uniform. She was in her, from head to toe, her military with her medals and everything. And she took me to both judges. She took me to the judge in New Jersey, the judge in New York, and pretty much advocated on my behalf, said, hey, this kid made mistakes, but he has potential. He can't join the military with a record. 9/11 has just happened. 9/11 had happened 9 months earlier. And she said, he's trying to join the military after an act of war. And if you can expunge his record, then I could get him in the Navy. And so both judges expunged my record. She went a step further, fudged the paperwork to sneak me into the Navy. And that was how I got into the Navy. That was literally, and if it wasn't for her actions, I'd be screwed, because I get messages all the time. For years, I've gotten messages from young people who've heard my story, and they say, hey, I made this mistake when I was a teenager. I got this little misdemeanor, or I got whatever, and I can't get into the military. No recruiter won't touch me, And they asked me what can they do, and I said, you got to find that right recruiter. I can't do anything because I'm not a recruiter, but you got to find that recruiter that's going to take a shot and put their life and their career on the line for you.
And she did take a long shot, because I want people to know that you signed up to be a Navy SEAL because of a movie that you watched, and you made it through 3 Hell Weeks, which is insane. I would love for you to share with people what life lessons and faith parallels set you up going through 3 Hell Weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I could do anything. I mean, I could do anything. That's the biggest thing. Once you go through, put Hell Week aside, just the first 3 weeks of first phase, you have tons of guys quitting, and then you're still there, and then you go through Hell Week and you almost die and guys quit, and then you start all over again, and then you just go through first phase again, and then you make it to Hell Week again, and then I made it through Hell Week, and then get kicked out of SEAL training in second phase, and then go back to Camp Pendleton, and then come back and start day 1, go through first phase again, and then make it through Hell Week another time. What it does is it shows you that, again, you could do anything. I mean, there are no restrictions. I own my this apparel company called Kejo, and this is one of our shirts. This shirt says unlimited potential. On the back of the shirt, it's an X-ray MRI of the brain, and the brain matter, the words that make up the brain matter is unlimited potential. And I truly believe that we all have unlimited potential. We just put these perceived limits on ourselves. And I think one thing that going through SEAL training that many times, not quitting at all, making it through,
people need to hear your whole story. You went in there not knowing how to swim, which is insane.
Yeah. Didn't know how to swim, and got in freezing cold water in winter time and SEAL training, and but still going, man. Just something within me saying, the lessons that I learned from my mom. Hey, keep going. You're not gonna die. You just keep going. And
but that T-shirt is spot on, because we do have unlimited potential. You can learn how to swim, even if it is in Bud's training, which is insane. But you know what I admire the most, Remi, about Frogmen is their commitment and dedication and sacrifice for a cause. How would you inspire an everyday civilian to be committed to their faith, dedicated to their calling, and really willing to sacrifice it all for their faith?
Just look at Jesus, man. That's the easiest way. There's no other way to be able to get somebody committed to their faith walk if they can't look at Jesus. Look at Jesus' example. Look at what he sacrificed for humanity. Look at what he went through on his journey to the cross, as carrying the cross, I think it's like a quarter of a mile uphill, after he had been beaten, dehydrated, that's a Navy SEAL right there,
with the sins of the world on your back, with the sins
every of the world on your back, and then having people cursing you and mocking you, and so that's, it all comes back to him. That's the best answer I could give as far as how somebody can be committed. The only way you can be committed is if you look to him and you see what he did and you believe on that. And if you truly believe in him, then that's going to affect how you operate in life. If you don't, if it's just something superficial, then you're going to see how you operate in life in the negative ways, and so that's just the easiest answer I can give.
I know. Jesus is always the best answer. If you don't have a faith in Jesus, you're going to tap out early, when things get hard, and it's going to be hard to be committed to sharing your faith, to standing up for Christ. So no, that's always a great answer. I got some tough ones for you. So how did the military shift your focus really 180 degrees from this inward search for meaning to finding meaning and focusing on others and really giving back?
I mean, I think that the military in general, it's called the service for a reason, because it's like, you're serving. You're not being.
Yeah, you're not being served.
You're not being served. You're serving, and so I think that's something that's ingrained in you from boot camp. This idea of service, and in the Navy as a whole can't be successful. The military as a whole can't be successful if each person does their job and operates within their role and responsibility. And then once you get into a community like SEALs, the SEALs is even more so amplified, where it's about, I never had a fear of death. My greatest fear when I would go on missions was doing something or not doing something that would lead to the death or serious injury of the guy to my right and the guy to my left. And I know that was the same fear for the guy to my right and the guy to my left. It wasn't about them, it was about us. And it wasn't about me, it was about us. It was about serving the guy to my right and the guy to the left for the purpose of accomplishing the mission. And so it's so ingrained in you that by the time you get out, you still, like, for me, like when I got out, like I still felt this call to serve in some way. And that's how I got into human trafficking and serving with different human trafficking nonprofits, and then making my human trafficking film, The Unexpected, which is on YouTube. And then now that film, now close to closing on financing, and that short film now about to be a feature film, because we got all these investors that are like, hey, I want to get behind this cause and serve with my finances by getting this message out here in a broader way. And so, this idea of serving just stays with you. Even as a filmmaker now, it's like, I want to serve through storytelling. That's why my first film that I'll be directing is a film about organ harvesting. The next film is going to be, my book, Transform, which is my memoir. And hopefully, just like my book has inspired a lot of people, hopefully the film will will inspire and motivate a lot of people and share positive messages that can impact a lot of people. But that's through serving. So service, it was ingrained in me through my time in the military, and it becomes so part of who you are. That's why I come across veteran. I was in a baby shower the other day, 2 weeks ago, and the buddy of mine, he's a SEAL, and his dad did like 30 years in the Navy. And so we were having a conversation because his dad was like, yeah, I have this nonprofit where, I just do arts and crafts, and I teach veterans who are struggling with PTSD how to work on arts and crafts so that their minds can be occupied with the creative, right? And he was like, man, that's my way of serving. Like, I still feel the need to serve. And it never goes away.
We should never lose that. We never should lose that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I definitely want people to hear your testimony. Who led you to God? Because I know your brother was praying for you.
Yeah, my brother, he was praying for me. He was a Christian. He became a Christian in college. And he would always tell me, he was like, because I would make fun. I would fluctuate between atheism and agnosticism. And he would always tell me, hey, when you hit rock bottom, always remember to cry out to Jesus. Because he knew that I was so stubborn that it would take God for me to hit rock bottom. So long story short, I met a girl who would take me to church. I would go to church with her because I wanted to do anything to be close to her and spend time with her. And then after I got what I wanted, and our relationship got to where I wanted it to be, I pulled her away from the church. And there's a lot more to the story. I break it all down in my book. But I went out to Kodiak, Alaska, and it was as though God held up a mirror and essentially showed me what I had become, and I didn't like what I saw. And I was kind of in the situation where I was suffering too, because I hate the cold, and I'm in doing a survival training in Alaska. So I'm isolated, don't have a cell phone, don't have much communication with the outside world. And all I had was my thoughts and this mirror that God had been holding up. And I didn't like what I saw. And so again, there's a lot more to the story. But when I got back from Alaska, I essentially asked my girlfriend, who had become my ex-girlfriend while I was in Alaska, she said, "Hey, can you take me to church?" And she took me to church. And this was after, we had pulled her away from the church. And that was when I was like, okay, I need something bigger than me to help me through my darkness. And that's kind of how it all happened. That was October 5th, 2008.
Yeah, people need to hear the full part of your story and your book, because, I love how you said, I can't fix my own wrongs, and only Jesus can do that. And I felt was strong point. I got some tough questions for you, because I know you've been on tour and you've seen some tough stuff. And we in this town, being from a military town, which I'm very proud of, my Pensacola, Florida, being home of the Blue Angels. But we have some gospel conversations with veterans that are agnostic, they're atheists. And when we have these gospel conversations, I mean, many of these veterans have seen some really wicked things, some innocent collateral damage. What do you say to your fellow veterans with this worldview?
The mind, I did a social media post the other day, and I'll actually read it because I think that that's very relevant to this conversation. Please. But I wrote, the strongest person's biggest battle is in their mind. The weakest person's biggest battle is in their mind. The richest person's biggest battle is in their mind. Right? Sorry, head. This is all head. The richest person's biggest battle is in their head. The poorest person's biggest battle is in their head. Regardless of the differences in our circumstances, we all share a common battlefield. It's all in our head. And I think, everybody, regardless of whether they went to war or not, whether they faced abuse or not, our own worst critic. We are always our own worst critics. And I think that we all have struggles in our minds. Everybody's is different. There's one thing we talk about in SEAL training is negative self-talk. And I think that, every human being can attest that they probably on a daily basis have more negative self-talk than they do positive self-talk. And negative self-talk could be like, dang it, I'm going to be late. Or like, you know what I mean? Like, or, this podcast is going to suck, or, like it could be little things, you know what I mean? Right. And so it's and the way we combat it is with positive self-talk. And the best positive self-talk is, Jesus' talk, the book of Proverbs, Psalms, the words of Christ, and that is what I can say, tell people. Hey,
that's so important, because we're biblically illiterate. And if we don't read the Bible, how do you, I may believe in the Bible, but if I don't read in it, how is it going to speak to me in my self-talk?
Exactly. And it's getting those words. There's a proverb that says, it is good, Proverbs 22:18, it is good to keep these sayings in your heart and always ready on your lips. I think that's so relevant, because when you have the words in your heart and on your lips, when the negative talk comes to your mind, you can combat it with those words. I mean, just think about Jesus when he was being tempted by Satan, and he fought him. The way he fought him when he was in the wilderness was with
Scripture.
The words of God. When the devil said, "Why don't you jump down and the angels will rescue you?" That's what the Bible says. And Jesus says, the word of God says, "Don't test the Lord your God." When the devil said, "Why don't you bow down and worship me, and I'll give you all the kings of the world," Jesus said, "Worship the Lord your God alone." Everything was combated with Scripture. And I think that, whether especially people suffering from PTSD, those words are powerful, man. The Bible says in Hebrews 4:12, the word of God is alive and powerful, sharper than the sharpest two-edged sword, cutting between soul and spirit, between joint and marrow. And when you get those words in your spirit, even as a new believer, man, it makes a difference. It's a tool. I remember when I first came to Christ, and I was struggling mentally, with a lot of things, and the first scripture I memorized was Hebrews 10:35. And it says, so do not throw away this confident trust in the Lord. Remember the great reward it brings you. Patient endurance is what you need now, so you continue to do God's will, then you will receive all that he has promised. And I remember just saying that over and over and over and over again as the dark thoughts, as the negative thoughts, as the demonic thoughts would come to me. I would just speak that, and I would get comfort from that. I would get peace from that. And so, for people struggling with PTSD, I mean, again, I know that do therapy, and I'm not knocking that, and medication, I'm not knocking those things. You could do those things, but the best way to overcome it is with the Lord, man.
Amen. This is probably the hardest question for you. I've spoken to friends in law enforcement, in the military, who have struggled with thou shalt not kill, but still have to follow orders. But however, speaking to a tier 2 operator like yourself, it must have been even tougher because the rules of engagement are different. You're in a unique position compared to most military members because you have to eliminate targets during a mission, even if not provoked. So as a believer, how'd you deal with this?
Well, it's understanding the scripture, though. It's not thou shalt not kill. When you look at the Hebrew it's like it's really murder. And when you translate it to the Hebrew, it's more so murder with so it's intent of like I won't go down there, but that's the translation, because then there's other scriptures like in Psalms 82, 3-4 that says, give justice to the poor and the orphan, uphold the rights of the oppressed and the destitute, rescue the poor and helpless, deliver them from the grasp of evil people, right? And then you jump to Romans, I think it's 12, I think, which says authorities are God's servants sent for your good, but if you're doing wrong, of course, you should be afraid, for they have the power to punish you. They are God's servants sent for the very purpose of punishing those who do what is wrong. So there's so many scripture that talks about protecting those who can't protect themselves and being God's tool, essentially, to bring justice, and so that was how I always justified it. Like it's not like good thing about it. I worked on both sides where I was an intelligence guy because I did human, so I wasn't just a part of my job was collecting intelligence on bad guys that we were going after. It wasn't just like, here's a bad guy, go get him. And it's not that simple.
Not just assaulting all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that simple. It's even to go on a mission, you gotta have evidence, and that evidence has to be corroborated with, I won't go down the road, but a lot of different forms of intelligence. And so I was blessed with.
It's not like the movies. Yeah, they have to have plenty of briefs before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you could be building a case on somebody for months before you can go hit the target, and exactly. So it's not that simplistic. And so I say all that to say, it was I was privy to a lot of information where it's like, hey, these guys were going after really bad dudes, they're killing innocent people. It was not something, it was like somebody told me they're killing innocent. It was like, no, I was able to, get firsthand information without going into too much detail and then go action and intelligence.
Now, you did a lot of human work with other faiths and religions. How was that like, doing 2 tours overseas with different faiths, but having to collect intel from them?
It was just a job. It wasn't, I didn't see it as complicated. It's just doing my job. I'm not going in as an evangelist. I'm not going in as a preacher. I'm just going in to do my job. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just going to be.
It was probably interesting to hear from different religions and backgrounds and faiths. I bet you that was interesting, though. I want to hear more about the C4 Foundation. Can you share about your work with them and what they're all about?
Yeah, so the C4 Foundation was started to honor Charlie Keating. Charlie Keating was a SEAL that I was blessed to go through buds with, and was able to do a deployment with him. And he was just an amazing guy, biggest heart, jokester, just an amazing operator, amazing person through and through, super loving, the most loving person, very patriotic. And we lost him in 2016. He was on the operation in Iraq and was killed. And so his dad and his wife started the C4 Foundation, and it's essentially to honor his legacy. And it's to give back to the community. So they have a ranch called the C4 Ranch, which is up in here in San Diego. It's East County, like East County of San Diego, and it's a place where actual active duty SEALs can go and be in nature, and there's cabins up there so they can go connect with their families. Their families could go up there and get away, and wives and kids can go and get away and experience nature and feed animals and just sit and reflect. And have you had a chance to go to the C4 Ranch?
I have not. It sounds amazing, though.
It's acres and acres and acres of land, and it's just serene, man. It's beautiful. And
what a refuge.
Yeah, and so before SEAL team goes on deployment now, they go up to the C4 Ranch. And they have a getaway up there, and spouses and families can go. And then when they get back from deployment, it's a way to kind of recalibrate and reconnect with their families. So they go up there when they get back from deployment. And then even if you're not active, if you're an active SEAL, if you're a former SEAL, and I think they've opened it up to other military personnel as well, they can go up there and just get away. And it's great. And there's all these different resources up there as well. It's not just you go up there and sit. It's like a lot of resources up there. So that's what the C4 Ranch does, and the C4 Foundation's focus is the C4 Ranch. How
can people find it? How can they give towards that?
Yeah, they can go to c4foundation.org. My memory serves me right, and they can go donate there, and that's the best way to support it. Yeah. It's amazing. There's a lot of veteran nonprofits out there, and they all do different things. But C4 does something very unique, and they're not just servicing veterans who are out, but they're also serving guys who are actively in, and prepping them for when they get out, prepping them mentally. So it's so important. An amazing foundation. Yeah.
I also don't want people to miss where you're going to be seen over the next few months. Can you share about where they can find you over the next few months? I know you're doing some awesome work about human trafficking and actually highlighting organ harvesting. I know people can find more information about your books, but if you'll share where people can find out more information about all of your projects.
Yeah, so you can go to my social media. It's just Remi Adeleke. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, my own YouTube channel. As a matter of fact, my organ harvesting short film, which is a 32-minute short film, is based on true events. That's on YouTube, my YouTube channel. I have a new book that came out recently called Chameleon. It's behind the Transform book, which is my memoir behind me. I have another short film that I did on that. There's going to be a feature film as well. But yeah, that's where people can find me on my social media platforms. I have a website, kejoware.com, KEJOware.com. We also sell signed books on that website as well, and other items. Yeah, that's where I could be found.
That's awesome. Well, I know people need to hear your full story, and they can pick up a copy of that story by going to Amazon. They can go directly to your website as well to get a copy of that book.
Yeah. Yep. If they want a regular copy, they can go to Amazon, Audible. I did the audio book for Transform and Chameleon. So yeah, they can get them there. If they like a signed copy of Transform or Chameleon, they can get a signed copy on kejoware.com.
Well, again, it's been really awesome to have you on the show and just have a different perspective from someone that served our country so honorably. And so I can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on, brother. Appreciate you. And thank you for all that you do as well. And thank you for supporting the C4 Foundation.
You bet. Well, that's all we have for this episode of the Rich, Young, and Powerful podcast. One thing that would really help both of us and other new potential listeners is for you to rate our show on iTunes and Spotify and wherever you tune in. But also check out my YouTube channel, The Everyday Philanthropist, where we answer your questions about giving, tithing, and philanthropy. And be sure to check out my book, The Giving Crisis, by just going to Amazon.com. But until next time, remember that when a giver gives more, they receive and become more. See you next time.